Welcome back into Ramon, Kayla, and Will here on this Friday. And we are so excited to be joined by our good friend Andy Staples of On3. Andy, how are you enjoying Mobile this week?
Well, I'm home now, so
Oh,
I
you're
enjoyed it
home?
very much while I was there because I was right next to Ramon Foster.
That's what I heard. You guys trading stories and everything, and obviously a great amount of talent down there this week. I'll start with that. Who kind of stood out to you if you're just going to pick a couple names, Andy?
Well, I mean, some of the people who we thought would be good were really as advertised. Tavondre Sweat from Texas, who was one of my favorite players all year, a 360-pound defensive tackle who just annihilated people. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see him in the NFL because he's not going to have to play as many snaps in the NFL as he played at Texas. And if he gives the same energy level and effort for the 30 or so snaps he's going to play in an NFL game, he's going to destroy people.
Andy, we've looked at some of these offensive linemen this week, and it looks like there's an abundance of them here in this upcoming NFL draft. The Titans clearly looking at drafting possibly a tackle, but Ramon Foster brought it up yesterday and said, hey, they could possibly trade down, get a third-round pick, and still find a tackle because there is so much depth. Anybody that you've seen this week that's really upped their stock?
I'm going to butcher his last name, and he told me how to pronounce it like 74 times. Kingsley Suamataia. I'm messing it up.
Suamataia.
From BYU.
That's what he told me, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
There you go. You got it, Ramon. He is a freak athlete. He got clocked at 21 miles an hour using that GPS when he was back at BYU, and you watch him move, and he is just a fluid athlete. And then, of course, Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma is an absolute freak of nature. Now, you will not be able to trade down to get Tyler Guyton. You have to.
Yep.
You don't have to pick him in the first round.
Did you also get a nugget from Kingsley Suamataia also that his cousin is also Penei Sewell?
Yeah, I mean that helps a little bit. But listen, there are so many good offensive linemen in the greater Salt Lake City area, which is where both those guys are from. I mean, it is crazy, and so thank the Mormon Church for its Polynesian outreach, which caused a large Polynesian community to settle in Salt Lake City, and the line of scrimmage play at the high school level in Salt Lake is unreal.
It really is, man. Also, there was another guy. I know you walked away from the table after the conversation and said the exact same thing that I said, man. The Titans will, I think, need some young D-tackle help.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Where am I going, Andy? Where am I going, man?
Braden Fisk from Florida State. That dude, you cannot not love that guy after talking to him for like 5 minutes. He's awesome. And as a player, I mean, just incredible. He played 4 years at Western Michigan. And then for his last year, he's like, okay, I'm going to transfer up a level and see what happens. And his final three at that point were USC, Notre Dame, and Florida State. He picks Florida State because that's where they had a need for kind of a gap shooting, three technique type tackle. And, oh, my God, he was the perfect fit in their defense. If you watch that ACC championship game, he was awesome. I think he had 3.5 sacks. And you watch him this week, and he's so quick off the line of scrimmage. And if you're looking for interior pass rush, like you're talking, the Titans grabbing him. Imagine him and Jeffrey Simmons together. That's insane, trying to block that on the inside.
It really was, man. Just real quick, because they're always a topic of conversation. Any quarterback, in your opinion, and maybe I didn't watch them as intently as I needed to, but any quarterback improved their stock, Andy?
I think Bo Nix probably helped himself a little bit. I mean, the thing about the Oregon offense that Bo Nix played in is it didn't require him to throw downfield that much, and so you didn't get a chance to see all he could do. Like Michael Penix was attacking vertically all the time. So you got a chance to really look at what he could do. Bo, you didn't really get that, and he made some really nice throws this week. And I think NFL teams are going to look at that. They're going to look at his mobility. They're going to look at his pocket awareness, look at what kind of control he had in that offense the last 2 years. I think they're going to like what they saw.
And on the back end of that, too, real quick, we had somebody in our chat ask about the question as far as cornerbacks. And I had a few guys circle, Andy. Cam Hart out of Notre Dame, Kalen King out of Penn State, Quinyon Mitchell, man. Did you get in it? The opportunity to put your eye on any of those guys on the back end?
Well, Quinyon Mitchell's Toledo, right?
Yes.
Yes, Toledo.
That's the guy. That's the guy. Because when I walked down on the field after one of the practices, because, I mean, watching him play, he's unbelievable. He's really fast. He ran I was told the reason that he has been so hyped is that they let him run at Toledo's Pro Day last year. Because remember, now you can have juniors run at Pro Day if you want. And so he ran at Toledo's Pro Day last year, and the scouts clocked him at 4.37. And so everybody's had their eye on him all year. And obviously what he did in their defense showed that it's not just raw speed, that he's incredibly talented. And so my thing was, okay, how big is he? And I got down on the field and walked over and got in a group that was interviewing him. He's like 6'1.5" long. Like, this is a dream corner.
Andy Staples of On3 joining us on RK Dub. So another position that the Titans want to stock up on, because clearly, we don't know what's going to happen with Treylon Burks. And I know he was a first-round pick. He's just not necessarily panning
out. He's not
out.
A.J. Brown?
Right, exactly. I mean, let's put it blunt, right? What kind of talent are you seeing in this year's draft, and particularly at the Senior Bowl this week in the wide receiver room?
I'm trying to think of the receivers there weren't a lot of receivers that really jumped out. Obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the guy at the top of the draft, but then there's not a lot of obvious next few guys. So that's a tougher one, especially if you're trying to replace that particular type. The six, you want like a 6'3", 6'4", 215-pound guy who can run. I'm not sure there's an obvious one in this draft.
And I think Ramon Foster, right here with us, who was down at the Senior Bowl this week, he mentioned Xavier Legette, obviously the South Carolina wide receiver.
South Carolina. Yeah.
I've heard kind of mixed reviews about him this week. Maybe he was dealing with a bit of an injury, and that kind of held him back a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about Legette. I mean, he was so good this season for South Carolina, especially like after Juice Wells got hurt. Everybody was just concentrating on him. So you had a situation where their line wasn't very good, so Spencer Rattler's running for his life, and Legette still put up big numbers. And so I think there's nothing you need to worry about from this week. And I talked to Jim Nagy about that, and I think Jim even tweeted about it this week. He's like, calm down about Xavier Legette. He's just fine.
Yeah, Rhett Bryan came here and said it was disclosed that he had an ankle injury that he was nursing down there also. So it's probably why you're getting some of that. The mixed reviews on him. But, Andy, the other topic of the week, man, that NCAA, and not just on Tennessee, but you've been reporting on this in depth, man. What have you got kind of gathered about how they're going to handle this and other universities as far as the NCAA investigating Tennessee right now and the lawsuit against them?
Well, Tennessee is not the only one. We already knew about Florida, and then we know about Florida State because their case is already wrapped up. But they have been looking at other schools in terms of NIL, how they recruit people, how they discuss NIL with guys who were recruits rather than who were already enrolled. And it's a key distinction to them. It's not a key distinction to the schools because the schools have kind of been operating a certain way since 2021. And what's interesting is I almost think it's the NCAA trying to commit suicide because their enforcement staff is going after some of the biggest schools, and these schools are like, this is just how we do business now. Like, what have you been doing for the last 2 years? Like, you can't change it now. You can't retroactively enforce it. And the NCAA is saying, well, we're not retroactively enforcing any rules. These rules have always existed. And it's very confusing because they've sent all these different guidance, things. They'll say, okay, we have new guidance on the NIL rules. And the compliance officers read it, and they're like, okay, this is what they're doing now. And then a few months later, more guidance comes out. And then at one point, they had one of their committees, not a large group, I think it was 23 people, vote and say, okay, for all NIL cases, the accused is presumed guilty instead of presumed innocent. And it's like, what are you guys doing here? And so Tennessee, which is in a weird situation, because remember, they just had an NCAA case. And they used that NCAA case so they could fire Jeremy Pruitt for free. So don't let them act all innocent in this thing. They've weaponized the NCAA to get out of paying $13 million to a coach who was losing. But by doing that, they then put themselves on the hook to be repeat violators if they got caught doing anything else. Well, if you go by the letter of the law, the NCAA can catch everybody for this NIL stuff. And so Tennessee doesn't have a lot of options here. So what's going to happen? Well, the state of Tennessee, Commonwealth of Virginia joined together, the attorneys general, they joined together, and they sue the NCAA saying that those NIL rules violate the Sherman Antitrust Act, which means they're basically collusion is what they're saying. And it is collusion. Every NCAA rule that limits a player's ability to make money is collusion. Like, the Supreme Court's already decided that. So it's going to probably get kicked when it goes into court. Like, if they have a hearing, the judge is probably going to rule for a temporary restraining order, which means the NCAA will not be able to enforce the NIL rules anymore. And that's really Tennessee's best option right now.
As far as timeline with this type of stuff, Andy, because court systems can take a very long time and lawyers get rich out of this, okay? How long do you expect this type of process to go around this time for the Vols and anybody else involved in it?
Well, as far as the temporary restraining order, they want it to happen next week. So If you want to look at a similar case, the transfer rules. And this is where I think it's really interesting. So last month, the state of West Virginia sues over the transfer rules. 7 other states join in. The U.S. Justice Department joins in. And it was over you have to sit out a year after your second transfer. So it's not even over the old ones where you had to sit out a year over the first transfer. Like, you have the free transfer, and they were saying you have to sit out a year for the second one. And they sued over that. And that, I think, and you guys know me, I hate most NCAA rules. Like, I thought that was a fairly reasonable rule. It lasted like 2 hours in federal court. It was gone. Temporary restraining order issued, followed by an injunction. NCAA backs off. Rules don't apply. I have no faith in this rule holding up, because this rule is absolutely cool. It's like what the lawyers call it is a horizontal price fix. And that's exactly what it is. It's the schools trying to control their costs by limiting how much money recruits can make. And I think the lawyers, the attorneys general who wrote the complaint put it the right way. It's like applying for a job, but you can't negotiate salary until you've already signed your contract. Like, that doesn't happen anywhere in the world.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Andy, and on the back end of this thing, man, you talk to a bunch of coaches, recruits and all, man. How do they actually feel about the NIL era as far as and recruiting that it's become? Because the NCAA had some purpose, and that purpose is to have, rules set in place. Are coaches somewhat getting fed up with how it's kind of breaking down, or they just say, we're going to roll with it until we can't anymore?
Well, the coaches hate it because it's more work for them. And it's more the transfer rules than the NIL. The NIL is not great, but it's the combination of the NIL and the transfer rule that make it hard for coaches, because you have to re-recruit your roster constantly. Like, a guy can come in week 4 and be like, listen, I'm going to need more money to play week 5. Or I'm hitting the portal after this season. And, you don't want it to be like that. But the problem is, the only way to negotiate rules or create rules where you can control player movement, if you wanted to have a salary cap or some sort of limit on compensation, the only way to do that is collectively bargain with the players. There's the only way you can do it without getting dragged into court. And the Supreme Court was very clear on this. They basically, Brett Kavanaugh said, that's one of the justices, he's like, if any of your rules come back before us, they're getting kicked. So fix it. And they're going to have to figure it out. Like, they're going to have to figure out how to collectively bargain with the athletes, unless they just want to keep this happening over and over again. And I think a lot of the leaders in college sports understand that now. There's still a bunch of true believers who think they can turn back the clock to 20 years ago. It's never going to happen. The people who with some imagination are going to have to take over and figure out how to change it, because there's too much money at stake. Like, anybody, you'll have some people calling, this is ruining college sports. No, it's not. You're still watching the games. You're still cheering. Like, we see the ratings. I see the numbers on the stories that we write about transfer portal. Like, people love it. They may say they hate it. Their actions prove otherwise. So shut up about this is ruining college sports. It's not. The people in charge get paid a lot of money. They need to put those salaries to use and figure out how to do it legally.
He is Andy Staples of On3. He shoots it straight, and that's why we like him. Andy, we appreciate all your insight, and get some rest and recovery after that long week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy. Always appreciate Andy Staples, and like I said, he gives us it straight, right? The
Yeah, he
facts.
does.
And I like that, and some of the perspective he gave on the NCAA situation. I think the more we talk about it, the more people are understanding kind of the timeline on this and, what's expected in the future. Because again, and he mentioned it, like things are going to have to get organized in some way, because if not, you are going to continue to have this type of confusion, and you're going to have coaches. And we just saw Jeff Hafley leave Boston College to take a defensive coordinator position with the Green Bay Packers. You're going to have these coaches continue to start leaving the college football landscape, and I don't want to see that happen personally, Ramon.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to see this all unravel in front of us, for sure.
It is. Well, we have talked a little Senior Bowl, and now it's time to get back to some of the excitement that happened earlier on with some breaking news here as the Tennessee Titans continue to put together their new staff under new head coach Brian Callahan. We'll get you updated on that. That's coming up next on Ramon, Kayla, and Will here on 104.5 The Zone.